Hey, everybody. We're going to get started in just a second. Grateful for folks who came out to make it on a Saturday. Hey, everybody. We're going to get started in just a second. I want to thank you for coming bright and early on a Saturday. I mean, it's not that early, but depends what you were up to last night. But thank you. I'm curious if folks who are joining me now are joining me from New Orleans, or if you're joining me from home or somewhere in between, perhaps an undisclosed remote third location hidden in a cone of silence, but would love to hear where folks are calling in from. I myself am in Brooklyn, which is where I'm based and organize. I'm going to go ahead and share my slides and we'll get started in just 1 minute. But yeah, feel free to jump in the chat and say what group you're with, if you're with a group, where you are, if you feel like sharing, and what is your favorite fandom these days? Whether it's the sports team you have always championed, or if it's a TV show you're hooked on. If you also secretly have a music podcast that we don't know about, feel free to share that. Okay. Okay. Gonna share my slides and we'll get started. Welcome to Organizing in Pop Culture Communities. My name's Ilana Levin. I encourage folks to live post this session if you'd like. It is only available in the app, but we'd love to build buzz for it. And I will also be presenting at FlameCon, which is the largest LGBTQ nerd conference. That's going to be, I'll be probably doing this in exactly a week from now, also in New York. So a little bit about, oh wait, I didn't share my slideshow. Here we go. Now you can see my slides. Hooray. That's my handle for Blue Sky, Organizing in Pop Culture Communities. Here we go. And again, feel free to ask questions in the Q&A function. I can see them. I'll put them on the screen as they arrive. Well, as it works with my presentation. And feel free to chat. Okay. So who am I? I am the host of Graphic Policy Radio, which is a podcast at the intersection of comics, genre media, and movements for social change. I've been hosting this podcast since 2012. Founded it with a friend of mine who I met through Netroots Nation, actually, but now I've been going solo for a while. And I've done this podcast as like my hobby that I do on top of my work, which is teaching digital strategy to nonprofit organizations. I worked leading digital for labor organizations, community-based organizations for a very long time. I'm part of that first class of people doing digital strategy dating back to like 2005. And now I get to teach people this year round because I am program director at New Media Mentors. And New Media Mentors is the educational partner of Netroots Nation. I teach digital strategy to nonprofits all the time. We do it online. And as you can also see down in the right corner, I got to lead a training and panel with Chase Masterson from DS9. I also have a Deep Space Nine podcast called Deep Space Dive. And yeah, New Media Mentors, we change organizations so they can change the world. I love this quote. Organizing is speculative fiction. Adrienne Marie Brown is a narrative strategist and a science fiction writer and organizer. I don't know if folks here saw Our Flag Means Death, the HBO show that had another season last year, and from before that, a wonderful show, super queer. It's like a queer leftist workplace comedy, basically. Um, and one of the main opening scenes is um, the leader of the pirate ship says that the history of piracy has been one of abuse and torture. And my thought is why? And also, what if it weren't like that? And when we say organizing is speculative fiction, it's because we're asking the question, what if things weren't terrible? Star Trek is about imagining a better world. What would exploration and teamwork, even in a sort of military structure, look like if it wasn't about conquest and it was about freedom and sharing things and education and exploration? And when you and I organize to fight for, protected bike lanes in our communities, we're asking the question of what would it be like to bike around our neighborhood without getting hit by a truck? That's speculative fiction. And no matter how terrible stuff gets IRL, we have to maintain our ability to ask the question of like, what if stuff was better, or else we can't organize for that future. Sorry, I'm going to keep this in a different window so it's easier for me to advance. And I want to thank everybody who shared your fandoms. We've got folks who are into Sonic the Hedgehog, Marvel, DC. Oh, and you're a member with the Starbucks Workers United and a content creator. Hi, Jason. That's fabulous. I think we might have just texted each other yesterday. We might have DM'd yesterday. I mean, on Blue Sky. Someone with the trans program in Mississippi, a fandom of Firefly, and someone from the nation watching from home in Chicago. I love it. Fabulous. So what is a fandom? Obviously Star Trek, right? But it's also sports fandoms. And it can even just be like a mainstream television show, like Parks and Recreation. Any sort of piece of media where there are people who love it and talk about it with each other, especially if you can find them online or in person at gatherings that are organized around a shared love of this piece of media or art, is a fandom. And stories are how people understand the world, and pop culture is where people spend their time. Um, the reason I got interested in fan organizing, in addition to wanting to organize people in the spaces where I spend my time and seeing the potential power in that. And as organizers, in the words of Ariel from Little Mermaid, I want to be where the people are. And, that's generally speaking not on our website. People are on Instagram or TikTok or what have you, or at a conference like a fan con talking about the shows they love. Fan activism is engaging in activism through storytelling and fandom by drawing parallels between popular media and real world social issues. I love this quote from Rusty Downey, who said, teen girls love the stuff they love harder than anyone in the world, and they are powerful. And the concept for fan activism, fan activism has existed since before I was alive, but a lot of this terminology comes from the work of Fandom Forward, which was founded in the Harry Potter fandom and then went on to become a multi-fandom organization. They are no longer in existence, but they really developed a lot of the training and literature and ideas that we're organizing from. Pop culture and organizing usually means either bringing pop culture into campaign narratives, which could involve like an influencer strategy. It could include culture jamming, and it could include organizing in fan communities, which would involve things like influencer strategies, especially micro-influencers, because micro-influencers are the most likely people to actually get back to you and are the most dedicated to talking about these conversations. And we, rather than trying to get like the biggest showrunner from the series to get on board, they probably have Disney breathing down their neck telling them what they can't say, but influencers can. Pop culture and organizing usually means bringing pop culture references into our own social media campaigns and narratives. Things like Star Wars Rebels versus the Empire as a metaphor for resistance to Trump was really big during the last Trump regime. And I remember seeing this piece of fan art that somebody made of Leia with the Rebel Scum jacket, and WFP just reached out and was like, "Hey, can we use your fan art to promote our regular rallies?" And they said yes. I think with if you want a piece of custom fan art, you need to pay for it, right? Pay artists. But if somebody made something already that really speaks to your organization and what you want to do, you can reach out and ask if you can use it. And they might say, sure, go for it. Um, I also organized Black. Oh, you know what? I have a slide about this later. I'll show you later. Pop culture and campaign content, it can be you using an existing pop culture meme to make the point you want to make, like this one from the New York Immigration Center. Which is just trying to resonate. This was viral at the time, this meme about for folks who grew up watching Blue's Clues, and they sort of connected it back to a particular experience of being an immigrant kid and kind of having to do things that are above what you should have to do at your age. Got a ton of resonance with far more comments and likes than the vast majority of their posts because it was using a pop culture meme and was making an emotional point. And then activists on their own will just show up at your rallies with pop culture savvy signs, especially young people, but not exclusively. I know we saw these at No Kings, and at basically every rally, there's somebody with a pop culture savvy poster. Do you folks remember this Barbie meme that went around? Barbie movie had these posters for their different characters. All the different women had these like inspirational job titles, like that woman, Barbie as a Supreme Court justice. And they made a selfie generator where you could be a Barbie or a Ken. And I love it. The folks from Make the Road Nevada, who do great social media, as among other things they do great, they barbified their staff, and they said this Ken is a housing justice organizer. And what's so effective here is that they weren't the only nonprofit to make Barbie memes of their members or staff, but they were the one that understood the visual aesthetic of the Barbie meme. So in their pictures, their staff are looking at the camera and smiling. They're clearly lit, brightly lit. So many other groups, it was like crummy pictures that didn't look like the meme. They understood the assignment. So these were fabulous. This is one of my favorite little pop culture things. Folks, during the Black Panther movies, Advancement Project and some other activists did this hashtag Wakanda the Vote, which was an effort to register voters who were waiting in line to see Black Panther. And it involved, being in person, making content based on in-person action, and then bringing it online. And when they posted this, the Black Panther hashtag was viral. Like this was like the main hashtag in the country. So it gave them an excuse to use the Black Panther hashtag and their own campaign hashtag, Wakanda the Vote. A lot of times, though, it can look like culture jamming, which is using a pop culture story and doing an intervention to show how it's like something happening in real life. And it's usually something critical. So like having there are many things that are considered problematic about having people dressed like the characters in Margaret Atwood's. What is the name of the women with the hoods? You guys know what I'm talking about. The show it left. They basically being that a lot of the horrors from this series are things that actually did and continue to happen to Black women, whereas the story sort of frames them as like speculative fiction. But the idea of like wearing costumes to a protest to make a point or to show a contrast between something, or to show how something in reality, like the Supreme Court's actions, are playing into a horror story, is culture jamming. Or the spoof that we did from the Queer Liberation March, really crashing one of T-Mobile's memes and bringing it in conflict with an advertisement. But culture jamming is not fan organizing. In fact, culture jamming can be critical of the fandom. It's cool. I like culture jamming. You should do it, but it's not what we're talking about today. So what makes a good pop culture campaign? It requires a strong understanding of the source material. Like, thank you. Yes, the show is called Handmaid's Tale. Thank you, guys. Uh, it requires a strong understanding of the source material to do a pop culture campaign. You have to read the literature, watch the show. You have to understand the community. You can't just show up. Um, you need to have a solid connection between source materials and the social mission. There's got to be respect for the source material and fans, alignment between who the fans are and the people you're mobilizing, which is often where there's a gap, and there needs to be active energy in the fandom at that time. Um, People have actually asked me, oh, you know what, before, um, one of the big themes from Game of Thrones was winter is coming. And that's certainly a climate change message, right? Like the bad guy in Game of Thrones is climate change. And people were like, well, how come there isn't a fandom campaign around climate change in Game of Thrones? And I think it's because the overwhelming momentum of the story for most of the time was moving towards bad things and worse things happening. Even though in the end of the TV series, they do stop winter, spoilers for a show that you all know the end to by now. The message throughout the series isn't really one of empowerment. And in fact, the climate change thing sort of feels like this trudge towards doom. So it made sense to me that it wasn't something where people were organizing to mobilize for social change there. What we also have to look at is, and this is from a presentation I worked on with Felicia Perez, who is leading, I think she just led it this morning actually, but an amazing training this morning. You have to think about the target, who is your decision maker, who you're trying to lobby, and you have to know who the audience is for your campaign. And the audience are the people that you need to reach and persuade, who have influence over the target. Remember, the answer is never the general public. We are never trying to speak to the general public because the general public doesn't exist. There's only specific demographics and slices and different groups of people, right? So if there isn't an alignment between, I'll get to that in a sec. Sorry. So you have to know your audience. What kinds of jobs does your audience have? Where does your audience identify? What hopes, dreams, fears, biases they have? How old are they? Where are they? And you have to know what kind of movies, shows, and books and entertainment they consume. One of my things I think a lot about is there's a lot of music that I love that is just deeply beloved by like white Gen X men with shitty politics. And I just have to come to terms with the fact that, my cat's named Axl Rose. And as much as I love Guns N' Roses, and as much as Axl himself has reformed in his ways politically, it's probably not the most strategically useful place for me to try to show up and organize a fan organizing campaign, because there isn't a ton of alignment between the fandom and an organizable population. This is just the reality. You have to identify what the audience values. You can do a survey, even do ads to reach fans of a particular show and survey them. Research what kinds of stories your membership shares. Like if you work for a member organization or a member for an organization, go and see what stories and pop culture they are engaging in, what they like, and ask your staff. You may find there's somebody on your staff who's like a super influencer in a particular fandom and you had no idea. And you could look at ad buy demographics for shows, because the ad buys can often tell you who's watching what. So let's talk about Fandom Forward, who are sort of the grandparent of modern fan organizing. They were founded in 2005. Oh my God, 20 years ago. Where did the time go? As the Harry Potter Alliance. And the question they asked was, how can we harness the energy and enthusiasm of fans for social good? The motto, Fandom Forward, turns fans into heroes. We're changing the world by making activism accessible through the power of story. There were so many young people and queer people who loved Harry Potter, and people who considered, despite what were later revealed to be the disgusting transphobic politics of the creator, and despite the anti-Semitic and fatphobic themes within her stories all this time that seemed to go over people's heads, like people were politicized by the series, and it was a crucial part of their childhood learning experience. So it was a ripe story, a ripe material for folks to do fan organizing in and to identify that. So they began with a campaign that's called accountability to the story, compelling the creators and distributors of a story to answer to the same values as the story portrays. So their first campaign was called Not in Harry's Name. And it was a campaign to get Harry Potter chocolates to be fair trade chocolates. There was like one of the plots in Harry Potter, I admit I haven't read them, deals with some class of people being enslaved. And as we know, lots of any chocolate that's not fair trade is like literally made by enslaved people, often children. So they did a campaign lobbying Warner or Columbia Pictures, whoever owned the licensing, as to say that the chocolates that were coming out around the movies should use fair trade chocolate. And the campaign's big breakthrough was when they finally got a message to she who shall not be named, J.K. Rowling herself, and she responded online on social and said, "Yeah, you're right. These chocolates should be fair trade." And they shift the manufacturing for a time of the Harry Potter chocolates to be fair trade. Since then, they organized a lot of different fan organizing campaigns. They have a report you can still find called The Best Organizing Strategy You've Never Heard of. I owe so much to the work that this group has done. I partnered with them on a Black Panther fan organizing conference, but they built campaign materials around all of these amazing different shows. So, speaking of J.K. Rowling, what do you do when something really problematic happens? Maybe there's a artist or creator in your series who turns out to be against your principles, or maybe a series that you've loved for a long time suddenly takes a swerve to right-wing propaganda points. I've had that happen to me in many things over the years. If you're organizing a fandom community, I highly suggest you let fans offer the critique before you point out problems yourself. I promise you, there are so many left wing, smart, intellectual fans of any given thing that there will be somebody with fan credibility who is calling out the problematic thing long before you've even noticed it. Showing up in a fandom as a nonprofit organization saying, "Hi, I'm Bob from SaveTheWorld.org, and we think XYZ is offensive," will not endear you to the fans of that show. But showing up and finding the posts where fans themselves are offering this critique is a different story. In fact, I'll show you from the fan organizing campaign I was just doing with Star Wars fans. There were people who were critical of something that happened in the recent Andor series, as wonderful and leftist as it was. And fans identify those things and talk about it and talk about the nuance. Additionally, you can offer productive responses for fans to take in response to something messed up, but you just can't show up acting like you're in charge of the fan response. It won't go over well. Another type of campaign is immersive, where we draw direct parallels between the events of the story and real world organizing. So I just worked with the great folks at Get Free. Get Free is a Gen Z led civil rights organization that works for reparations justice. And one of the organization leaders approached me because he's a massive Star Wars fan and was like, Andor season 2 was coming back. While Star Wars as a whole is a very anti-fascist story, Andor in particular is extremely timely, extremely newsworthy. Folks in the chat, how many of you guys watched Andor? Season 1, season 2, any of Andor? I'd love to hear who watched the series. Star Wars, going back to the very beginning, like George Lucas was writing it as a critique of the US war against Vietnam, right? So leftist analysis, an anti-colonialist analysis is literally the origin point of Star Wars. But the Andor series, was just next level political. So we launched this campaign together. Here's from one of the launch posts. Calling out Star Wars fans. Star Wars is a story of anti-fascist rebellion. Fans like us have a unique opportunity with Andor season 2 to intervene and organize for a country not so far away. Sign up for Nemec's weekly manifesto through the link in our bio and learn about real life history and theory of anti-fascist movements that's inspired Star Wars and what you can do right now to rebel against white supremacist imperialism in the US. So we hired a comics artist who had done work for Star Wars comics before. So she was known in the Star Wars fandom. Shariel is her name that she is an artist creating work under. We hired her to make this beautiful piece of fan art poster that we released about a month before the show began. Because it was our art and it was new fan art and it looked like Star Wars fan art because it was Star Wars fan art. We got a ton of energy. Also by hiring a fandom artist, they're going to cross-post that to their feeds, which means you've automatically gotten the eyes of their fans watching what you've made. So we were able to launch. We really began to grow the email list. Obviously, we did a lot of memes where we took themes from the individual episodes every week and used it to educate about the leftist perspective. the scene at Left where two rebel leaders across generations are talking about everything old is new again. Um, I really needed this one emotionally. The me realizing I'm a part of a cycle of fighting fascism, but my ancestors did it before and I can do it again was like something I needed to hear. And then, oh my God, the agricultural scenes from Andor, where you had all the farm workers and like they're literally dealing with the Star Wars equivalent of ice raids. Like completely transparently, there is an ice raid in the Star Wars series. We use this from the May Day and May the 4th, right? May the 4th comes right after May Day. May the 4th is like a Star Wars holiday people invented. But we didn't just make memes, right? We did Nemec's Weekly Manifesto, which meant we wrote an in-depth newsletter every week that the series was up. And we pulled quotes from the show that we thought were particularly relevant to things in the news. We linked to actions people could take online. These were all online actions, like click here to sign a petition, click here to send a message to your elected, really easy, low bar asks, because as I'm sure you will know, you've got to always keep in mind the ladder of engagement and make sure that oh, is my camera off? My camera's off. Did I unplug it? What is happening? My camera is totally off. I must have unplugged it. Hold on. Sorry, guys. I mean, I guess you don't necessarily need to look at me. But anyway, hold on. Can folks hear me okay? Can folks hear me? Are folks able to hear me? Okay. You can see the presentation still if that helps. Okay, so I'm just going to have to accept that you can't see my highly here we go. I don't know. Okay, well, the important thing is you can hear me. I am going to text. Oh, wait, we're back. Oh, we switched cameras. Okay. I'm back. Oh my God, this was literally a pocket dial situation because of my stupid cell phone. Putting it away from my pocket. Okay, I'm back. Anyway, thank you all for bearing with me here. So we did Nemec's Weekly Manifesto, which was not a light lift. It was an in-depth newsletter that we had 4 people working on, providing analysis of that week's shows, linking to actions. We had pitched Get Free staff as guests on a number of different podcasts. And in fact, I featured them on my own podcast, Graphic Policy Radio. And it was like writing a long blog post every week full of research links and historical references. It was a major success in terms of growing the email list for the organization. Like people opted into the email list for this manifesto, but it was a lot of work and people thanked us for it. You can see this little post I got up here from someone. They were just like literally straight up, oh my God, signing up for this now. How cool. Thank you. And we reached out with my friend Claudia Amenabar, who, by the way, you can all hire to work on your fandom campaigns. She does this work for companies, but she's also personally a big leftist and happy to collaborate with you on this kind of project, as am I. Claudia built a list because she's a Star Wars influencer. She built a list of other Star Wars influencers who she thought would be amenable to a leftist Star Wars campaign. And we reached out to them all, like individual outreach from us to them saying, hey, can you support this newsletter? Can you link to our social content? Can we have a guest on your podcast, et cetera, et cetera? And we got a really positive response. Like video feed. Hold on a second. Are you guys are hearing me okay, but the video feed is a bit delayed. Is that it? Um, well, hopefully this will help now. So nobody told us no. Some people like just didn't get back to us. A lot of people we noticed were very slow to get back to us and said yes. And that's because a lot of people who are doing this are this is like their hobby. This is not their full-time job. Like there's a lot of influencers for whom yes, it's a full-time job, but for so many people it's like their thing they do on the side. So, I work in like I used to be like literally a press person for a labor union, and I remember having that sense that like if somebody doesn't move on something I send them immediately, the world is going to end. I'll have missed my opportunity. I've pitched press before. I know how fast things have to move. And what struck me was that I had to stop panicking. Like, one, build that long list, build lots of contacts, reach out to a lot of people. But if it takes a while for folks to get back to you, do not panic, do not give up. They can just be very slow. But and while the general public has a very short window where they might be following a series or caring about a series, the real fans stick around. Like there are still people making videos about Andor now, this many months after the series ended. So even if you can't get the best placement for your organization that you wanted right away, don't give up. It could happen later, and you'll still reach the most dedicated fans. You know, I mean, there's really like a lasting staying power for the targeted fandom versus like the general watching public. And if folks want to read those newsletters, I can include some links to them. I'm going to upload my slideshow after this webinar so you can get links to see everything. So, but it wasn't just the newsletter, right? We set up an activist Discord people could join. There's a whole channel in Get Free's Discord that is for Star Wars stuff. And now they're starting a new channel that's for talking about Beyonce and the whole Cowboy Carter tour, because they surveyed their membership, talked to their members, and found out they had a lot of fans of Cowboy Carter and Beyonce in the membership. We moved people from the online conversation to in-person gatherings. So like we got tickets to see there was like a talk in New York City and another talk in LA, and people went to that in person and met up. And we held virtual watch parties. We actually have another virtual watch party coming up where we're going to watch a couple of really good episodes from the Star Wars animated series, which, by the way, the Star Wars animated series, if you can get over 3D animation, which as an older person, it took me a while to get over, are like extremely leftist. Like there's literally an entire series called Rebels where it's Star Wars rebels setting up revolutionary cells with some useful lessons about organizing, and it's aimed at 10-year-olds and 11-year-olds. So a lot of these young people in this group like grew up watching these shows as an influential part of their childhood. So I'm not surprised they're ready to do some leftist organizing. But anyway, we have a virtual watch party for some key episodes of that series coming up. So it's an ongoing commitment, right? Like the level of intensity of the commitment to the fandom organizing will ebb and flow as other projects, other priorities, other factors happen, right? But you have to have some amount of ongoing commitment. So yeah, I'm going to be doing a more in-depth training with the folks from Get Free and with Claudia at FlameCon in New York. I don't think that's going to be online, but I'd love to keep talking about that work with you guys. Back to my friends with Our Flag Means Death. Our Flag Means Death's fandom is extremely queer, extremely trans. There's like a million trans guys who came out through watching that series, and non-binary people too. And one of the things I stumbled on was there was a lot of fan-led fundraising. And what was really cool about the fan-led, there's been fan-led fundraising around tons of things. Like when the Wonder Woman movie came out, this is kind of one of my beefs. People were fundraising money to send low-income girls to see the Wonder Woman movie. And I'm like, yes, low-income girls deserve to see the Wonder Woman movie, but like that studio can afford to pay for that. Maybe the campaign should be lobbying them to like release free tickets to like, girls who live in supportive housing, for example, rather than us paying for them. Anyway, part of why that happened with Wonder Woman is there wasn't any organization doing fan organizing targeting Wonder Woman watchers at that point to tell them something else that was better or more sensible to do. Like, fan organizing will happen whether you tell people to do it or not. If left to their own devices, you have a lot of really well-meaning people who might not have the best analysis of political strategy. But getting back to Our Flag Means Death, Our Flag Means Death fans did something very cool, though, which is they did fundraising for small LGBTQ organizations for whom raising these amounts of money would actually be meaningful, right? So one of the fans of the show worked for SAGE, which is a nonprofit for queer elders, small nonprofit, but they have an online fundraising forum, and they did a fan fundraiser and a fan auction with tons of fans donating time and buying auction items to support SAGE. And SAGE was like, holy cow, did not expect this. We love this. Thank you so much. Because getting several thousand extra dollars that they didn't expect. I'm sorry, I forgot what the total amount, and I should get it. It was pretty freaking impressive how much money they raised for SAGE. It was really lovely. When the show looked like it might be getting canceled, and eventually was, the fans also did an online postcard mailing campaign, mailing cards to HBO demanding a renewal. And during the writer's strike, fans did enough fundraising to send food trucks to the writer's strike picket lines that were like care of the Our Flag Means Death picket. I used to work for the Writers Guild, and I can tell you members really appreciated that. And that was all fan-led. Fans just did that on their own. And they worked with, and then Fandom Forward stepped in and organized an online live stream summit. One of the actors from the show, Vico Ortiz, is like a big activist, and so we were successfully able to recruit them to participate, which is not like, it was obvious if we were going to recruit somebody, it was going to be Vico, because they post activist stuff on their own anyway. But most of the live stream was activists, artists, YouTubers, cosplayers, not people who directly work for the show. They led a series of online actions and conversations for fans of the show. Ultimately, 400 people participated, and they did 1,275 actions to fight anti-LGBTQIA bills. So signing petitions, calling your elected, that kind of thing. You can actually watch the live stream. It's still available online. I do want to pause for a second and say that if folks have questions, feel free to throw them in now. I'm going to keep going, but like, you might have stuff you want to ask already. One of the big common themes I've seen in fan-led campaigns have been fans asking creators and distributors to create media that reflects the fan base and the world at large by being more diverse. This feels like lifetimes ago, and I guess it was. There is a Marvel series that is really steeped in some really stupid retrograde Orientalism, but had the opportunity to change that by making the main character Asian American as opposed to white. So like fans were literally campaigning, including someone who was writing for Marvel Comics at the time, saying, hey, all the things that make Iron Fist problematic would be resolved if it was about an Asian American character exploring his heritage rather than a white guy showing up and deciding he was going to be the best at doing everything. There was so much fan outcry around this issue that it literally drove the news cycle. So rather than the news covering, hey, look at the new Marvel show, the news was literally like, fans are upset that an Asian American isn't playing Iron Fist. Now, I'll repeat, this isn't a case of a character being whitewashed. The character was white in the comics. This is a case of fans saying, this thing could be fixed if it wasn't a white character, and doing so in enough numbers that we own the news cycle. And something that cracked me up was that the Twitter banner for this show, when it launched, switched from being a picture of the show lead to being a banner that featured the Asian American actress who was kind of like a major character in the series, but not the lead. So like Marvel's marketing was like, oh shit, we have to do something about fans. So why don't we point out to them that there is an AAPI actor in the series, even though she's not the lead. And then I found out in the second season, they actually made her role more prominent. So interesting to do that. Fans regularly campaign for more queer characters, more queer representation. Lots of fandom stuff throughout the decades has had queer subtext. It was awesome seeing literally Alice Wong show up in a Netflix series as herself in character leading a disability rights rally. I guess I went over this material before, but basically, like, yeah, if organizers aren't showing up in fandoms during key moments, fans are going to make their own things because these stories are about change. These stories are about making the world a better place. And so like if we leave this opportunities on the table, fans are going to do nice things, but they won't be as strategic as what you or I would do if we were, jumping in. Um Yeah. Oh, something interesting we did for Black Panther Fan Activist Con, which was a partnership between myself, Felicia from Center for Story Based Strategy, Fandom Forward, is we basically led workshops online. And this is before the pandemic. So this was before everybody was doing online workshops. We were leading online workshops in fandom skills, whether we like group visioned a piece of fan art that we hired a really excellent um, fan artists to make. We made gifts together. We hosted a Twitter town hall, and I trained some nonprofit staff in these skills. And what was cool is we were able to bring together some folks from Black environmental justice organizations and fans of Black Panther, so that it was bringing some love not just to big civil rights groups, but to some smaller ones as well. We had 157 people attend, and we made 107 gifts in 34 hours. So, like, we were interjecting our messaging into the language of gifts that you could access through Tenor. So, a few rules of the road always to research what fans love, what they're into, what they like about the show, and how they talk to each other. And think about, is mobilizing fans to support your campaign, is it going to meet your goals? Is the target of your campaign a fan? For example, if you're targeting a lawmaker and you find out that that lawmaker loves a particular series, I feel like this is something that would work really well on Democrats, probably not as much on Republicans, but like if you have a Democratic elected official who's like not pushing forward to getting a bill signed and they're a big Star Trek fan, which you can find out, then boy, do you have some ability to like call on that elected official to live up to the honor to the values of the Federation. So knowing what kinds of things your target loves can be powerful to try, and knowing what kinds of things the fandom you are in is interested in. Like I mentioned, that gap between some of my music love and some of the target audience is not quite lining up. Whereas for, Get Free, organizing Gen Z and Black millennials, like the Beyonce, opportunity is like really clear. And are the story and the campaign narrative in alignment? Like I said with Game of Thrones, does the story offer a glimpse of hope for the future, or is it a story where like literally everybody dies in the end? I mean, look, there are definitely tragic, dramatic moments in these Star Wars stories, and we certainly know, as they say lazily, somehow Palpatine returned. But overall, in Star Wars, there is a story of cycles of freedom that you constantly have to fight for. You have to be on the alert, but the good guys do have space to win. You need to make sure that all of your outreach, you sound like a human being and not like an institution. A lot of the outreach that we did was done by us from our personal accounts, from our individual accounts, rather than our organizational accounts. Um, which is one of the reasons why I post on social media about the things I love, about the things I watch as myself, and I post about my organizations all from the same account, all from the same place. And including with my fandom stuff that's not particularly useful for social movement, like it's all there. So I am clearly a person with opinions, loves, passions, and not just like showing up to astroturf things. Be honest about your agenda. When you're posting, you can also like, it might not be the first thing you say that you're with a particular organization, but it should be something that you do say. Hire artists, especially from fandoms or communities you are organizing. Even if you're not doing a fan organizing campaign, if your nonprofit is looking to get some more social media shares, like hire fandom artists. They are great resources for getting your work in front of more people. Here's a great question I'm going to share. Um, Nation says, I see a lot of depoliticized, apolitical folks in fandom spaces. So many community discords I've joined over time have a no politics prominently featured in their rules. How do you handle this barrier to political conversations and organizing? So, while I would respect a specific Discord's rules there, often you can trace people to other places where they might be hanging out that don't have that rule and can approach them individually. Um, it also is going to require some experimentation because sometimes places that have a no politics rule might not have a rule against fundraising for charity. And maybe there's some ability to do a little bit of moving into that for them. Um, it also will depend, like, it might be that the politics of people in that fandom are bad and you wouldn't want to organize it. But in a lot of fandoms, like for example, in Star Wars, there's a big split. There are a lot of right-wing politicized fans who completely miss the point of Star Wars, who do not understand what the actual text is saying. And there's also one, what the text is saying, and two, what the other fans think and know. So, for example, we found that there were more right-wing Star Wars fans in specific Reddits than in some other places. Like, Tumblr is going to skew queerer, right? So, like, where you find the fans can reflect what their politics are. Like a Song of Ice and Fire, we really found, like, not that we actually organized in this, but this was an observation I had as a Song of Ice and Fire fan. The fans on Tumblr were more left wing, and the fans on Reddit were more right wing. Um, Jason says, I am going to co-sign Nation Guard's concern, especially in cases where they try to conflate politics with drama. And I would like to know how to navigate that as well. Yeah, like, there are times where a particular online community space is not going to be infiltratable by us because of the politics of the people who are hosting it. But there are always other spaces. Like, I am constantly getting random X-Men 97 Facebook content pushed on me on Facebook. And in some of them, I can tell that they have those kinds of rules, and in others, they clearly don't. So, like, Queer X-Men fan Facebook group does not have a ban on political content. Now, does this mean that it's harder for me to try to use an existing leftist story to politicize fans of it towards my politics who might be apolitical at present? Yes, it does. But we have so many people in these fandoms who share our politics, who are not connected to organizing, that we can make more easy inroads with the people who are already with us but not organized. So we've seen right-wing Star Wars people use Star Wars to negatively politicize right-wing people and activate them, right? We've seen people use that. I haven't I don't think that we're as able to, because of the sorts of moderation rules you guys both pointed to, show up and read left-wing politicized Star Wars fans in places that have forbidden it. But there are leftist fans already, and we can reach the leftist people who we have. So also think about, where are Black and brown, where are queer, where are women, like people who are demographically more likely to be aligned, where are they talking about these shows? And often they will have different moderation policies, or like be like fine with political stuff. There's also like a question about, like, you're not going to pick fights, right? So there's a difference between going and like posting something positive versus like going in to argue with people, I find as well. And Jason, I suspect you're talking about Superman, but I'm not sure. um Being honest about your agenda, as I mentioned, so, like, sorry to bother you. I think, like, again, you can disclaimer that you're with a group, but, also, like, say why you love it, why you care, be real. Fans are always going onto different subject social media platforms, and in fact, you can often figure out what's the next big social media platform by following where the fans are at. Um, and I would ask you guys, like, are there other social media platforms and places where you're hanging out? I've personally felt like there was a particular moment several years ago of where tons of left-wing, especially queer X-Men fans got off of Twitter. This was, like, basically when Musk bought it, but before it absolutely went to shit. Got off of Twitter and started just spending time on Discords, and one of the Discords is because there's a couple of really popular LGBTQ X-Men podcasts, and the people who are running those podcasts are, like, very clear about their politics. You know, the majority of the conversation is about the comics themselves, but it's very clear what the political alignment of those spaces are. And so, like, Discord is like, if you're a queer X-Men fan, like, it's all about Discord. So it's gonna kinda depend, like, what is your fandom? Where do they go? You have to do research. I have a quiz question for folks. What is this an example of, in these 2 pictures? We have a rally that is outside the Disney store. This is from early in the first Trump regime. There was a campaign calling on Eisler, asking him to leave, not Eisler, Bob Iger, telling Bob Iger, "You should leave, Donald Trump's leadership council." There was a hashtag they were pushing called Disney Let Him Go. Um, here's me and my friend Heather at Right. I'm wearing every piece of Disney merch I owned at the time, which was my Cyclops fan shirt from X-Men, some mini ears from a costume. Uh, the wonderful Raphael Shimonov made these beautiful Disney fists for Resist Trump Tuesdays. What is this an example of in this image? What kind of fan organizing is this? Um, okay, I'll just spoil it also just because I know the clock is ticking. This isn't fan organizing. This is culture jamming. Why? Because we were a crew of supporters of WFP who showed up at a store and held a protest outside of it. That's not trying to engage with and reach fans of Disney, which is something we totally could do. This was just us using the imagery to call out and use the visual imagery to call attention to our issue. Again, culture jamming is great. Groups should do it, but it is not the same thing as organizing in a pop culture community. If we were doing real organizing in a pop culture community, we would have spoken to Disney fans saying, "Hey, if you're a Disney fan who doesn't like white supremacies, like, let's go and send a message as fans to Bob Iger, etc." Oh, yeah, so I have a slide for that. So where do you find fans? Fans are already doing community organizing projects, and you should definitely search for them. You can also look for them in some official places. Sometimes authors, publishers, cast, crew will do activist things. Um, but you don't need them, and often they're censored from it, and it's not required. Like, it's interesting. Like, one of my favorite influencers on social media pushing people to activist things is the comics writer and writer of other things, Greg Pak. And so he'll, like, literally I can't even tell you how many viral posts he has on Blue Sky telling people where and how to volunteer for phone banking and canvassing, for trainings, just like anything that you could possibly want, like a leftist to publicize and promote on social media. But he doesn't. He also writes a lot of Star Wars comics, and he's written a lot of X-Men comics. He's written Incredible Hulk. He never actually combines the Star Wars comics he writes with the activism calls to action, because, like, Marvel would have his head if he did that. So he has a platform because he's famous for writing for Marvel Comics, and he uses it for campaigning for the good guys, but he's not going to show up and do like and support the Andor campaign, because he literally, like, I mean, sorry, he has not told this to me, but my perception as someone who has many friends who write comics is that, like, you can't do that for the series, but you can do that as an individual, as yourself. Oh, this is a really great point. Coming back here from trying to get this show. There we go. Jason, not gonna lie, people seriously underestimate newer fandoms, like the K-pop fandom. Yes, K-pop fans literally did an amazing crash to get all of those tickets to, like, this Donald Trump rally. They didn't bought up, but they reserved all the tickets so that people who actually wanted to go couldn't even get tickets, you know? Like, Young people are always showing up in new places, finding and developing new strategies. Find the fans, set the scene, and remember, fandom consultants are fan creators and influencers, and like you can partner with them. This is still a field where you can find new people to work with and do. It is not for a lot less money than hiring like McKinsey or whomever the hell else. Set the scene, draw the connection, make the value statement, have a call to action, and then share your success. There are a lot of conferences still happening. Comics conferences, Star Trek. I know Working Families Party has a lot of presence at fandom things for the Good Housewives series and for drag race conferences. So, like, WFP is partnered with famous drag queens to do voter registration work, for example. Very cool. And they'll do this stuff at conferences. And the queens are just like excited to be able to do this. So think about what do we know is coming up? When is there a new series coming up? Read Variety, see what's coming up next. Think about who you want to influence, figure out whether it's a good fit for you. And I want to thank you all for coming and talking with me today. I'm going to hang around a little bit. I can take questions. What's coming up next for new media mentors is I'm doing a course called The New Online Organizing, and it's starting this fall. It is for any organization that looks to recruit new members and move them up the ladder of engagement from online to off or online to on, because believe me, there's plenty of meaningful things that people can do on the internet. I have a recent webinar I led on Blue Sky. Love that platform. I'll be doing our masterclass on the new narrative strategy, which is beyond branding. It's on voice, visuals, organizational identity, online and beyond. And I would love to lead a training on fan organizing for you and your organization. I have consulted for groups like Get Free, but they're not the only one on fan organizing campaigns. So, let's keep this work going. Catherine and Wright says they're working on getting pre-registration increased, which I believe means getting people who are not quite old enough to vote pre-registered to vote so that as soon as they turn 18, they can vote, right? Are there any particular teen fandom spaces? Well, Lord knows lots of music fans are young, and I would go and straight up look to see like who's buying those records and where you can identify folks. There's certainly artists. There's Head Count is an organization that was founded by deadheads that has like just the best voter registration work of just about any organization. And it isn't just for deadheads now. They will send people they work with artists to send voter reg teams to concerts. So I would reach out to Headcount and talk to them and see what they think about music stuff. As for other fandoms, um, you can look at both shows that are aimed at young people and look at what young people themselves are posting. Survey your base, survey young people in your life. Are they all into One Piece? I like literally have a friend with a kid in college, and I'm always asking them, what are kids your age into? And they're always saying to me, well, I'm weird, but, and I'm like, okay, well, are you the only person you know who likes this? Or perhaps is there like a crew of other young people like you who are also into the works of Australian indie musician Johnny Jash? And the issue was, oh, they have other friends that are into it. There's a lot of young people who are into musicals these days. Like, there's just so many different areas and issues. Sarah asks, would you say that looking online or going to conferences, conventions is more effective for finding larger fandoms to collaborate with? There are smaller online gatherings for smaller fandoms, but I guess it's sort of a question of like the size. I'm not sure quite how to answer, but like you will find at a comics convention fans of video games, role playing games, tabletop role playing games have like a huge comeback. There's a lot of like live play podcasts for people who play those games, uh, Dungeons and Daddies, and like just lots of shows for that. So you'll find lots of sub fandoms at bigger fandom and bigger pop culture conventions. Um, like Supernatural still continues to be a big thing despite it all. So if you go to any major fandom convention, you will find lots of smaller fandom stuff there that you can consider tapping into as well. Oh, good. I'm glad to hear Headcount was on your list. I haven't talked to them for a bit, but I'm pretty sure they're still out there. Nation says, you mentioned working in union comms previously. I am currently doing digital organizing work for a union. Do you have any thoughts on potential overlap between fandom and union organizing? So one thing we found during the writers' strike is that fans of TV shows, there are some people who are like, shut up and bring my show back. And there's a lot of people who are like, we stand with the workers. So the writers' strike, wasn't that long ago. And you can go back and look and see which TV show fandoms were the most vocal in support of the writers' strike and which ones weren't, and learn a little bit about the orientation to union organizing from how they reacted to the strikes. It's a kind of a good litmus test there. In terms of using fandoms to organize workers, if I were organizing Starbucks workers, I would go and talk to Starbucks workers and see what fandoms they might be in. So many Starbucks workers are artists. I suspect that there were a lot of comic book fans. I'm not sure though, specifically, but like it's going to come down to talking to the members and seeing what they're into, and sort of learning from them. Um, and it's going to really matter for demographics. There was a campaign who Shango mentioned who I felt like was using a lot of iconography that resonated with me, but I could tell wasn't going to resonate with the membership because their membership wasn't really involved in that fandom. Like you have to really think about alignment between what are the members consuming and loving and what are you trying to move people to do. So like with any kind of union campaign, you're always thinking about target analysis, artist analysis, and where does that line up and where doesn't it? Oh, this is great from Jason. Artists, comic book fans, furries, sci-fi fans, the works in terms of union workers. Yeah, I would say, folks, like the furry fandom is huge and online and very, very dedicated. I don't really have a good sense of class analysis around the furry fandom. Certainly, aspects of that fandom involve having a lot of money to buy things or make things, but there's also people who just get art commissioned. And now you're probably like squirming because you're like, oh, it's sexual. I mean, sometimes, not exclusively. There's stuff that is, stuff that isn't. I certainly, as a person who spends time on the internet for organizing, have been exposed to some things I didn't particularly feel like seeing through my work, but like such is life, I guess. But yeah, like I don't show contempt for the people you're organizing. I have to say, like, there are so many fan communities, like for, oh my gosh, the Insane Clown Posse, right? A band that everybody likes to joke about how dumb they are. They successfully organized to keep Nazis out of the fandom. Lots of other fandoms of music that purports to be smarter than the ICP failed to do that. So, we can't afford to be stuck up about this. Thank you all again for joining me. You guys have been fabulous. We've got a few more virtual sessions today. Don't hesitate to reach out. I think that I got in contact with Get Free because they saw one of my trainings. So I would love to keep this work going. And I want to thank you all again. Have a great day.